Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and often we hear about, housing crises and property rights and all of these things. And they're very important issues. And if you try to ever build anything these days, the hurdles that you have to jump over to get something done are pretty amazing. I'm really honored to have with us today Jeremy Talcott. He's an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, property rights practice. And he also leads the Pacific Legal Foundation's Coastal Land Rights Project, which puts him, well, quite frankly, routinely at odds with the California Coastal Commission. And of course, pacificlegal.org is one of the great organizations, frontline warriors, in your behalf. And I highly recommend that you check them out, track their cases, and support them, pacificlegal.org. Jeremy, thanks for your time. How are you today?
Doing very well, Perry. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. What is the Coastal Legal Land Rights Project? What is that?
Well, at Pacific Legal Foundation, we've recognized for quite some time that the California Coastal Act especially, but coastal property more generally as well, is really kind of the front line of private property rights. In other words, it seems to be where regulators have been the most aggressive at trying to strip private property rights to protect what they perceive as a very limited natural resource. And, although I think we all agree the coasts are beautiful, people love using the beach, things like that, we don't believe that that means they're allowed to constitutionally simply strip away people's rights and prohibit them from building on their private property.
How's it going?
Well, it's always been a difficult battle, especially in California and in California courts. But, our very first signature win at the United States Supreme Court was a win against the California Coastal Commission, and that came in 1987. And right now we have a case that's pending before the California Supreme Court against the Coastal Commission. And we've just had several victories in the superior courts as well recently. So, it's always difficult to fight the government, but we keep doing it. And because the Coastal Commission has overreached so often, I think we've been able to get quite a few victories.
How big of a mess really is this? I mean, we're watching what's happened in Southern California. All of this comes into play. I don't know what's your take on California fires. I mean, there's a lot going on there. But is this commission involved in some of that problem down there?
Yeah, obviously the reasons that the fires happen, there's many and they're varied, but really stems from the fact that California is in Southern California especially is kind of a desert area, and we have very high winds, which is a great way for fires to start and spread. But I think where the commission and California more generally can really get a lot of blame is how difficult it is because of all of these various environmental and coastal overlays for people to do the sorts of things that would keep these fires from being as out of control and expanding to so many of these neighborhoods and simply destroying entire areas of Los Angeles. And really what it comes down to is it's very difficult to get environmental permits to do things like clearing brush, even on your own property, on hillsides where these fires grow and become more powerful. It's very difficult and costly to get permits to modernize and remodel existing homes where you might be able to then make more fire-resistant homes. And it's very difficult to build new homes, which also ties into things like the existing housing crisis in California, where we're millions of homes short of existing demand and certainly of our expected demand over the next few years.
So, Jeremy, how far inland does the Coastal Commission go?
Well, it actually varies quite a bit, and a lot of people are surprised to learn that the coastal zone can stretch as far as 5 miles inland. So, the kind of main area of jurisdiction is usually the first 300 to 1,000 feet, and always from the first kind of road parallel to the shoreline and seaward. They always have jurisdiction over those areas. But in rural areas, they have taken jurisdiction over, again, up to 5 miles inland. So the coastal zone in California covers roughly half of California's citizens.
Wow. Okay, so what's their ultimate goal? Run everybody off the shoreline?
Well, yes. Frankly, yes. The commission is very has a lot of antipathy towards private development, towards private construction, towards private homes. But in recent years, they have adopted a very explicit strategy of managed retreat, whereby they believe that with sea level rise and natural weather events and other things of the nature and erosion, if they do not force these private homes to be removed, the beach will essentially vanish. So their goal is to allow nature to reclaim these homes and to push the beach inwards and essentially destroy thousands of homeowners' private property rights entirely.
Has the Endangered Species Act entered into the equation?
Yes. Yeah. This is also yet another overlay. And in California, we have both the Endangered Species Act and the California Environmental Quality Act, both of which are environmental overlays. And as I mentioned before, with these environmental regulations, it's very difficult to do things that would lead to fire management. And I think it's also, even despite these laws, it's emblematic of a precautionary principle state of mind by many of the people in charge, whereby they would prefer to just leave things as they are than to take any of these fire prevention measures, even on public lands, that might, again, prevent these fires from spreading and becoming as damaging as they are, because they fear that they might disturb a potential threatened species habitat. So I think that overall state of mind, as well as the various laws involved, have led to a lot of inaction around the sorts of behaviors that could prohibit these fires from spreading and becoming, again, something as destructive as these most recent fires have been. And most of these steps are not things that are surprising or unknown. They're things that we used to engage in, and really, as environmental regulations have become more strict, it's things that we've stopped doing. Okay,
this is really amazing. I got some other basic questions here as I lay a foundation. Is climate change a part of their policy?
Well, that certainly informs quite a bit of the California Coastal Commission and California more broadly, their policy measures. So I think I find it surprising, when they say these recent fires were made worse by climate change, or we should blame climate change instead of the governance of California. Even if you accept that proposition as true, that climate change is making these fires worse, we should be taking steps to address that increased risk. And again, in the face of what they have said is a risk that these fires will be more numerous and stronger, that means we should be taking more aggressive steps to clear out brush, create fire breaks, ensure that homes in California are made from the most modern materials and techniques that will allow them to be more fire resistant. So, I think to whatever extent that plays into it, it still should just inform how we behave, not be a get off the hook explanation for the fact that we've just seen so much of Los Angeles burn to the ground.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Thank you. Okay, so here you come, and you're trying to fight for the property rights of the owner there against an amazing brick wall. Are there any grandfathered rights for the property owner that become the benchmark of your defense?
Yes. So each of our cases is, of course, unique, and pursue many different avenues. Obviously, one of the long-standing protections in our U.S. Constitution is that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. And that's really at the crux of a lot of our cases, is when government tells you, yeah, you have this piece of private property, but we'd actually prefer you didn't build on it. We think that maybe there's some endangered animal habitat that's on here, and we think it'd be really great if we preserved that habitat to help this species thrive. Well, that may be a laudable public goal, but a single landowner is not the person who should have to bear the price of that public goal. So when we step in, oftentimes our argument is, if you'd like to make this a critical preserve for a threatened species, that's within the powers of government, but you'd better pay the landowner, because otherwise they have the right to use their private property. And using it and enjoying your private property, especially for something like a single family home, is really a fundamental core aspect of private property rights.
Gosh, this is fascinating. All right, let me take a quick break here. So honored to have with us today Jeremy Talcott. He's an attorney now with the Pacific Legal Foundation Property Rights Practice. All this is serious stuff, especially for those in California these days. You can go to pacificlegal.org. The whole organization, this team here is spot on. They're doing a great job. Check it out, pacificlegal.org. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and so honored to have with us today Jeremy Talcott. He's an attorney now with the Pacific Legal Foundation Property Rights Practice. He also leads the organization's Coastal Land Rights Project, and that puts him up a lot against the constant conflict with the California Coastal Commission. By the way, pacificlegal.org is their website. Go there and support them. They are frontline warriors on our behalf. Jeremy, so many questions about this. I would assume the feds get involved as it relates to endangered species?
They can, yes, absolutely. You know, they're certainly they are involved in, especially enforcement and issuing permits. It's a relatively complicated interplay between state and federal involvement, because oftentimes you can get sort of exemptions for an area that then allow a local government to essentially engage in a lot of local permitting without having to go to the federal government each and every time. So you see that a lot in local jurisdictions, but at the end of the day, the authority under the Endangered Species Act always flows from the federal government.
If there was to be a management change in California, you get a new governor eventually down the road, will that have an impact on the Coastal Commission, and certainly a new president? Will that have an impact?
Well, you know, especially for the Coastal Commission, as to the Coastal Commission, I think a new governor would have quite a bit of potential ability. Although that said, the commission itself tends to operate very independently. So the 12 members of the commission are appointed by the governor, but also by the Speaker of the House and another aspect of the legislature. So although it would take some time for any change of leadership in California to actually change through the members of the commission. And again, as far as the decisions that the commission makes now, the governor really has no ability to override or intervene. And we saw that even just in the last couple of years here, where, for example, a very large and expensive desalination project in Southern California, after I'd say 20 years of planning and 10 or so $1 billion of investment, that project was simply shut down by a denied permit of the California Coastal Commission, even over the support of the governor. So we do have areas where they've made decisions even contrary to the governor's wishes, and really there's no mechanism by which the governor can intervene or override that decision.
Oh, gosh, what a mess. All right, looking at these fires, it appears that some of their policies now have been proven to be dangerous. Do you think these fires will have an impact on any of this in the future?
Well, it was very interesting that in the immediate aftermath, well, I should say, as the fires were still burning, since they still are to this day, but after the destruction of the Pacific Palisades area, the governor actually issued an executive order suspending both the California Coastal Act and the California Environmental Quality Act, at least as to the requirements for any rebuilding to follow those regulations. So even the governor understood that in the wake of losing thousands and thousands of homes, it might be a regulatory morass and delay rebuilding for years if individuals had to follow these environmental regulations. And so he issued an executive order under his emergency powers to suspend them. Of course, I think that really begs the question if we can suspend those regulations so that these landowners who've just suffered loss are able to rebuild in a time of need. What does that mean for just the regular individuals who are trying to build over these last few years, again, in a state that needs critically thousands and thousands, if not millions of more homes to meet demand?
So it's possible, if I'm hearing you correctly, that some of these homeowners won't be able to rebuild.
I think that's certainly a possibility. There's, I think it really remains to be seen how all of these various regulations play together. But I would say under the existing interpretations of the Coastal Act by the Coastal Commission, at a minimum, many of these homes that had been built certainly could not be built today. And certainly not in the same fashion or the same locations along, especially along the areas of the beach itself. Really, the beachfront, waterfront properties along Malibu beaches. I think certainly under existing regulations now, especially as to the use of seawalls or other shoreline protection, which the commission is very against in its procedures and policies. I think it would be very, very difficult for many of these individuals to build an identical home. Now, the Coastal Act has a provision which allows individuals to rebuild a comparable structure when there are acts of God, such as a fire or flood, tsunami type of thing. But even with that in place, we've seen in the past where the commission attempts to prevent those and argues that the new structures simply can't pass muster. So I think the steps of the governor to intervene and kind of preemptively keep the commission out of this was probably a good move, but the emergency powers can only last for 180 days. So we'll see whether or not the governor continues renewing that. I don't think that even a small fraction of these individuals will be able to rebuild in that time.
Well, not only that, let alone get a plans and get permit and get okay. That's a can of worms. I'm just curious, the cases you've won, given everything we've talked about so far, that's got to be a big deal. I mean, you're pushing against a mountain when you win a case, right?
Well, it certainly can feel that way. And, the commission, they're represented by the Attorney General's office, so the Department of Justice here in California. So for individuals that don't have representation, such as PLF, it's an incredibly difficult battle. It's time consuming. The costs added just by delay, let alone litigation costs, can be massive for any developer, especially smaller developers. So, we like when we can find these individuals who we think have been wronged by the commission, can take over their case and help them out.
Do you think in the future you'll see any of these cases go all the way to the Supreme Court?
I would not be surprised at all. We are constantly pushing our cases forward. We're continuing to fight these property battles. As I mentioned, we have one right now pending at the California Supreme Court, which I believe is the first major case involving the Coastal Act that's been before the California Supreme Court in about a decade. So we're looking forward to the opportunity to maybe place some meaningful restrictions on the commission's jurisdiction in that case. But certainly, if they keep prohibiting private property rights, we're going to keep fighting. And whenever possible, we're going to take those cases as high as we can.
Well, I just want to say to you and the whole team there, Jeremy, thank you. You guys are real hawks on behalf of us common citizens. I've always been really concerned about property rights. The American dream is being squeezed away because these property rights are being lost due to regulations and commissions and just nonsense, quite frankly. So I want to say thank you to you and your team and all you guys over there at PLF that what you're doing. It's just amazing. So let's stay connected. I'd like to know how these work out and see if you have any more cases that pop up as a result of what's going on in Southern California.
Thank you very much. Will do.
Okay. PacificLegal.org is the website. PacificLegal.org. There's a picture of the landing page. And check it out and support them. We'll be right back.